All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the VI Livecast series. My name is Selvi Sekar, and I'm the Content and Community Lead here at Brand Innovators. Today is really special, and I'm thrilled to kick off this Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Livecast. We've got a phenomenal event in store with an awesome lineup of marketers. Before we get started, we'd like to thank all of the marketers, sponsors, and even you, the audience, for helping make this event possible. Throughout the event, you will be able to use the Q&A widget and the chat widget at the bottom of your screen. We encourage you to engage with our speakers and other attendees using these tools throughout the program. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Marissa Solis, SVP of Global Brand and Consumer Marketing at NFL, and their moderator, Marty Berman from AdMix.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Marissa. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
How you holding up?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
A little crazy for you this time of year?
It's crazy this time of year. This is the best time of year when we plan the future.
Exactly. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. We'll get into this real quickly. Just really want to do a quick introduction. AdMix, here we are the gateway for brands to enter the metaverse. I know that everyone wants to know what that means. And Marissa, you and I talked and laughed about that a little bit yesterday. And, our approach is just very simple. We own property. We help build, on that land for brands, and then we help activate and extend that. So it's really a full stack experience. But today we're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion with Marissa. And I'm very excited. Marissa brings a tremendous background in CPG with some tremendous brands at Pepsi, and has recently made the move over to the NFL. And, Marissa, if you can, talk to us a little bit about what excited you most about this switch.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I spent 18 years at PepsiCo, wonderful journey, wonderful company, all of our, hopefully favorite snack and beverage brands. But when this opportunity came up, I mean, it's really something you cannot turn down, right? When you think about the power of the platform that the NFL represents, and yes, of course, the joy of the game and all of those things in fandom, but particularly when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, oh my goodness, this is probably the place to make the most impact, right? And right. Hey, everybody knows that the league is on a journey, as most companies are. But I think that the decisions that we make and the way that we do things moving forward will have such a critical and massive impact to so many that I couldn't, turn down the opportunity. I think it's an exciting time to be in the league for all the reasons, right? Of the game and the league business. But even more so because of what I think we can deliver from a diversity, equity, and inclusion point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, I think that you're right. It's definitely been a journey, and there have been some bumps and bruises along the way. But I think that this platform now really provides you with this global opportunity, and is really exciting. I mean, you've just got such a community to advertise to and to bring into the fold of the NFL. And I'm excited to see all the things that you're going to be doing within the next coming years. So, you touched upon that. I think that, more and more corporations are looking to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's been obviously a very big topic. So from a society standpoint, how is the NFL approaching it from a marketing perspective? I know we talked a little bit about that yesterday, but if you could go into a little bit more detail about your thoughts and what plans you can share of, where you're planning to take everything.
Yeah, I'll start very high level, and I'll take you specifically into our marketing, initiatives and our marketing strategy. But at a very, very high level, I mean, diversity, equity, and inclusion is the foundation of everything that we do. Because, at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. We have to be a reflection of our communities, and in Pepsi, it was a reflection of our consumer base. For the league, is a reflection of our fan base. And when you look at our fan base, I mean, Super Bowl, 206 million viewers. That's, 2/3 of the US. there's bound to be a very diverse, set of fans that we have to make sure that we connect with. And so that's at the very foundation, we have to reflect the communities that we serve. But very specifically for us in marketing, we have a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, we want to communicate the joy and the excitement of the game, and the fact that the game brings people together. And that in and of itself, speaks to the diversity of the nation, how we bring, the nation together and how we can become a unifying force. But the other, part of the two-pronged approach is really elevating the stories of what the league does in our communities every day. I don't think people realize and see the impact and the influence and really the force for good that our players do every day, that our clubs do every day, that, we call it the NFL family, but that impact is massive. And we just haven't really amplified or told those stories. And I think it's important, for people to see how communities are being impacted every day, with the influence of the league.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as I think you stated before, you've got a tremendous platform to be able to really, at both a grassroots level all the way up to the corporate level. And you've got 32 teams and 32 communities to reach out to, and in addition to all the national and international activities that you have at your disposal.
Definitely.
And you talked about you're at the team meetings now, at the league meetings, which is a crazy time. So again, thank you for peeling out some time for us today. Where do you see, along those lines, that biggest opportunity for engagement with consumers around diversity, equity, and inclusion in 2022? You've got such a wide, a deep bench to go to, again, at each different level. If you could share with everyone a little bit about that strategy of, from, a local community level all the way up to the corporate level, that would be, wonderful to hear.
Yeah. I mean, let me start first with marketing, right? And how we engage with our fans. Obviously the foundation is representation. Our fans have to see themselves in the work. That's the foundation of everything. And I think we've done a better job, I will say. There's still obviously a lot more we can do, but a better job of really being more representative of the fan base in our communications. I talked about that two-prong approach at kickoff this past season. We kicked off with, our We Run as One campaign. And just as it say, we run as one, we're many communities running as one, in the pursuit of the joy of this game, right? We launched a really cool spot where there's many different people talking about we got your back, because the fans have the teams back and the teams have the fans back, and just all of these diverse communities coming together is really, really powerful. But then we also did a lot of work to elevate, our communities of color and our diverse communities. One of the biggest and boldest moves that we did, was recognize our LGBTQ fans during Pride. And, we had a very powerful spot. We basically came out and said, hey, football is gay, football is lesbian, football is queer, football is for everyone. Football is Latino, football is African-American. And it really, football is for everyone. And I don't think we had done, the best job that we could to really illustrate that. So moving forward, making sure our fans feel seen is kind of the foundation, right? So you'll see a lot more in terms of marketing communication. I think our events, the way that we go about engaging with our diverse communities, now we have an army of influencers across all, diverse ethnic groups, across all ages, gender, and it's great to see that, because our influencers are telling the story in their own words and really reflecting that. So that's going to be, really important. And I'd be remiss, obviously we're talking marketing, but hey, it needs to start with people in the league, and everyone in the league has to reflect that diversity too, right? So our hiring practices. There's obviously a lot in the media around that. I think we've made a lot of progress internally in the league, in our executive ranks. You're starting to see, and we're starting to bring in that diversity. And we've got to do a better job in the league. And I actually, I can't talk a lot about everything going on, but I will say there was a really exciting press release that came out yesterday, just talking about the league really upping its requirements around the hiring of female and minority coaches across all of our clubs. And that's going to be key, because you need diversity, obviously in marketing and at the executive level, but you need it everywhere, everywhere, right? So that's going to be super exciting. I don't know how much but this year also we signed a new deal to expand our league internationally.
No, I didn't know that.
18 teams will be playing in Mexico, really bringing to light, the energy of the league, for all of our Mexican fans, which are huge fans of the NFL, both in the US and in Mexico. We're expanding our games in England. We're also going to Munich. So our international approach is also, reflective of the spirit of just bringing in kind of this global sense and global look at the sport that we really haven't had before. So it is really, really exciting.
Yeah, no. That is great news. I know. I remember back when the first game was played in London, and I just thought that was so exciting and so interesting to see the expansion overseas, and now moving to other markets. I think that's just phenomenal, and I think the fan base is reflective of that for the NFL. It is really becoming a global brand, much to some degree like the other leagues that have expanded globally. And that's really exciting to see. And that you're taking that same approach overseas with your marketing as well, I think is obviously very important. So that's fantastic to hear, and congrats. As specific programs are launching in 2022. What do you think, has been that you can share, is really, really innovative or unique in reaching a new community? I know you talked about the LGBTQ community. Are there any other programs in terms of how you're specifically reaching that you can share that you think are really innovative or unique?
Yeah, I mean, you'll see it a lot in our advertising. You'll see the continuation of what we did in 2021. So I don't know if you saw, all of our playoff spots were 2 Chainz. 2 Chainz was kind of our spokesperson. We used a ton of kind of social digital media to communicate with our younger fans. So all of that will continue, but I think more and more really linking the connection that the league has to pop culture, because that's where you see the influence of diversity and inclusion. My goodness. I mean, you look at what we did in Miami, and, when we brought, J-Lo and Shakira, and really the Latino feel to the Super Bowl. And then, oh my goodness, LA was absolutely unbelievable, bringing together, communities of color representing Inglewood right there in LA for everyone to see. So leveraging the power of pop culture, not just in the big moments like Super Bowl, but really across the year. I think we have a very exciting event coming up in the draft, and you're going to see again a lot more of a personal, human, more authentic approach. We call it our helmets off strategy. And in doing that, you will see the diversity of the prospects that are coming into the league, how those prospects not only obviously play the game and are awesome, quarterbacks and linebackers and everything else, but how they're bringing their communities with them. Right. And I think really telling those stories of, I mean, gosh, the moment that you are welcomed into the league is a massive moment, not just for you as a player, but for your family, for the community that you bring with you. And I think that gives us a big opportunity to elevate, again, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the stories that we tell, because they're there. They've been there. Yeah. By the way, they've been there forever. Not that I think we just haven't really told those stories, and it's important. It's really important.
Yeah, no. I 100% agree with you. You read about and hear about all the good that NFL players do to bring back to their community and to give back to their community. It's, you always, I love those NFL stories that you always see about this player, what they're doing at a personal level, but it's nice that you're also going to highlight that even, more so in the future, because I think that, the NFL historically has always been, very diverse, from a player standpoint for the past 30, 40 years. So it's nice to be able to see that coming to the forefront now, not only at a league wide level, but also, really celebrating the players and the diversity of all the players. As you look to 2022 and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we talked a little bit about innovative or unique. What are you most excited about from an initiative standpoint? I know there's so much that you're doing, and I can definitely feel the passion and the excitement in your voice. Is there one particular program you're most excited about to launch in 2022?
I mean,
2022.
Yeah. There is a lot. I'm just most excited that I think people will see the difference, and not just in the work that we do on the front of the camera, but I think when you look at who we will be working with behind the camera, behind the scenes, the collaborations that we'll do with, whether it's young designers, whether it's musicians or artists, really painting the diversity there, because it's really important that we partner, with all diverse partners, as well as showcase the diversity. So I am definitely excited for that. I think I'm very excited that you will see pipeline programs, again, to really elevate diversity and inclusion, and bring in, those communities that, haven't really been in the forefront in the league. So whether it's working with HBCUs, the Latino community, our Asian community, LGBTQ. I mean, it's just exciting to be able to bring, what we see the future fan base, right? When you think about our fan base and the future of the league, it is increasingly young, by the way, very young, very diverse, and very multifaceted, right? So we have to be that in order to continue, and grow that fandom over time. We can't take for granted the fans that we have.
No, absolutely.
We have to continue to build our fans in the future, right? So
right, absolutely, and the fans of the future have to represent society today.
Absolutely.
And it sounds to me like you're really taking an integrated approach to the subsection of what you're doing as a whole, though, but integrating it into the overall feel and appeal of the league. And
I will say sorry to interrupt you, but
I will say not at all.
That I can't believe I didn't mention, because it's probably what I'm most excited about. The way women will interact with and be seen in the league will also be elevated. And when you think about women, women are influencing every part of the league. They're not just, executives like myself. We've got presidents and GMs, but, future coaches and even future players. When you think about the future of the sport, so there's going to be emphasis on flag football and, female participation in the sport. I think that gets me super jazzed. Because again, football's for everyone. And, as we develop the league, women is a big priority. We have 80 million female fans today. It is the highest of any sports league.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to continue to grow that. So that's exciting as well.
As painful as it is for me to acknowledge, which I think yesterday, lifelong Bears fan, and my daughter is a Packers fan. So that has been a painful experience for her whole life for me. But the fact that she's just an NFL fan, I love, and the competitive nature between the Bears and the Packers, and she's just a big Packers fan. I love it. So It's nice to see, though, that she's grown up and still, even though she's not a Bears fan as much as it pains me, she's a football fan, right? She can tell you
Yes.
all the players on the Packers, and she loves it. She's 15, and the fact that she's now this next generation of football fan, I'm sure has got to make you happy. And the fact that she's so
Definitely.
into it is exciting from my perspective, because I just care that she's a football fan.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
But it's no, but again, it's all it's I love the story that you're weaving of really, there's so much inclusion across all different areas within what you're doing, that it's going to be so prevalent and so obvious. And I think that's really going to have a big impact this year in terms of, just to see and to watch that unveiling. I'm really looking forward to watching that this year. So, and throughout yours, as you've grown your marketing career, what have you found that's had the most positive impact as it relates to you personally from a diversity, equity, and inclusion? You've had a long and illustrious corporate career at many different brands and in leadership, and as a woman in leadership, a female leader within marketing. What's been, what have you found to be the most positive impact for you personally?
Yeah, it's a great question, because obviously it's been a very long journey and it continues. But I will tell you, for me personally, it's been those individuals and organizations where the focus isn't necessarily on diversity, it is on inclusion.
Got it.
And there is a big difference between diversity and inclusion, and they're both important. But it's the times where it wasn't so much the focus around what you look like and that you had to have a mosaic. It was more around, how do you embrace the people that are around you and make sure their voices are heard, make sure that those voices are incorporated into the actions that we take. That is inclusion to me.
Right.
So it's always been people who never even cared that I was a female Latina leader. They just cared that I was a leader, period, end of story, right? And they saw that. And then, obviously being a female and being Latina matters, because then I bring that, all of what that means and represents and all the color of that.
Sure.
And it enhances, everything as you bring these diverse voices, right? But it does start with inclusion, because you can have the most diverse organization, but if you don't hear those voices or incorporate those ideas, it just, it's just
Exactly.
it's a nice mosaic, but it's not as powerful as it could be. So that I would say had been my lesson. And as I come into the NFL, that's my focus. It's like, yes, we need to be diverse, and we have work to do there, but let's start by being inclusive, and then the rest will come, right? So that would be my take, I guess.
Yeah, no. I think that's a great point, because you're right. The mosaic can be there, but if it's just not really incorporated within the organization, it's really a missed opportunity. And I think that over the years, you've definitely, I think it first started with diversity, and then from there it became, okay, great, we're here, but you need to hear us now. And it needs to really become, and you're absolutely right. You're a leader. You're not just a female leader. You're a leader. You have, and that should be the way that you're considered. And it's nice to hear that that's, really the focus, and that's where you are, and how you're planning to bring that into the NFL with you as your career grows. And, along those same lines, what's been the biggest challenge that you've experienced over the years? Is it throughout your marketing career? Is there any particular challenge that stands out in which you've been able to overcome and that you were most happy with the outcome?
I mean, gosh, there's been many challenges, right?
Sure.
There are always barriers to overcome. I mean, I've been very lucky that I've always had people at my side supporting me. I really do think the biggest barrier is just people who lack the authenticity, right? And I always say it's okay to get things wrong. I think we try so hard to say the right thing and get it right. It bothers me. I mean, this is a very personal view, by the way. But I think we try so hard to say the right word or the right thing that we don't focus on actually just walking the walk. Actions are louder than words. And, you can say the wrong thing. And if you mean well, then, we can have a conversation and there's a moment of education that happens, but
Right.
the heart has to be open to that. And I think the biggest barrier and my biggest pet peeve is just people who talk the talk, but don't have the open heart to really walk the walk, right? And diversity, equity, and inclusion, I mean, you can talk the talk all you want. You got to walk the walk, and that's hard. It's
Oh
very hard.
yeah.
And it's a journey, like you said. Sometimes you walk along and you take some great steps, and sometimes, gosh, you make a mistake and you got to walk backwards a little bit and then get ahead. But walking the walk is the biggest
Yeah.
challenge and also the biggest opportunity.
Yeah. And I think from a society standpoint, as I've watched this change, I think that's probably been the hardest thing, right? For those changes to take place. And and in everything that both from a brand marketing perspective, and just, you've got to be authentic, right? And if it's not authentic, it's going to fall flat. And I think, what you've described today of, your approach, your philosophy, the approach that the NFL is taking, it feels very authentic, right? And I think that is wonderful to hear, because that's going to come through in everything that you do. And that's going to resonate with those communities too. And they're going to feel that inclusion. They're going to feel that, this is for me, and that they're talking to me as an individual, not just as a fan, but who I represent as a fan of the NFL. And that's really exciting. Before we've got one question right now. I'm just going to take a pause, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to jump in. We have one question so far, and thank you so much for asking. Is diversity is being invited to the party, and inclusion is asked to dance at the party, which I think is kind of interesting. And I think you touched on that a little bit in terms of kind of how you're doing it, but absolutely, inclusion is so much a part of it. And yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective to look at it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's exactly, what I'm saying in terms of inclusion is first. Representation is a foundation, but if you're not listening or
Right.
inviting those people in, it's really not, it doesn't make the impact that it has to make. So it's important to ensure that the focus is on inclusion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And it was, I think that was a great point you made earlier, is that it just really is about that inclusiveness. Throughout your career, obviously, working at Pepsi for such a long time and working on, in leadership on all those brands, what's been the most, the program that you're most proud of? If it's around diversity, inclusion, or equity and inclusion, great. But like, what's probably the most shining moment for you that you're most proud of?
That's a tough question too, because obviously there's been a lot of things, but for me, so at PepsiCo about 4 years ago, we started a Hispanic business unit. And at the time I didn't want to be, the person, because I thought, well, gosh, I'm kind of being pegged to do this. And I didn't realize just the power of what that meant, because for the first time, a massive company recognized the economic significance
Right.
the Hispanic community represented to the company, so much so that they created a business unit, dedicated to the 60 million Hispanics in the US, and to make sure, making sure that we, served them well, communicated with them well, made the right products for them, sold them in the right way to our customers,
Right.
spoke the language, like all of those things were so important. And I don't think I realized it when I was first tapped to do it. And as we took that journey and we created this team that, all Latino, serving, our Latino communities, and we saw the economic impact that had, but also the cultural impact, the internal impact that it had on our employees, the external impact it had in our communities. It's incredible. And, I'm so excited. It's still, it's still alive and well. I think Esperanza Tisdale, who leads it, has been on Brand Innovators and has talked a lot about, all the power of the things that they're doing there. So it's exciting to see that legacy continues. So that's probably, I would say, probably one of my proudest.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome. That's exciting. And I love how you just shared the eye-opening experience of the impact that it had throughout that program that really made it important to you to be able for you to see the impact of what you were doing on a broader scale.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
so that's great. We do have another question, which I think actually, plays right into that last question. That is, what are the insights that you include in your campaign briefs that lead to authentic storylines and narratives versus simply representation and casting?
That is a fantastic question.
That's a great question. That's a great question.
Yes, and it is incredibly important to have the right insights because nuance is everything. And so I will say the very first thing is clearly identifying our audience. And so it's not enough to say, okay, we're doing something for Latinos or we're doing something for the LGBT community. I mean, in and of itself, those communities are so diverse and have so many passions. So our insights get to a very specific point in terms of who is that audience? Are we talking to our Gen Z gamer? Are we talking to, our avid fan who watches, 10 games on NFL Network and, goes to every game? Or are we talking to someone who's never been to a football game and loves soccer, as an example? I mean, there's so many nuances to the insights. And we really, really unwrap that person that we're going to talk to really understand who that person is. And then what is it that we want this person to believe or feel or think because of this particular ad, right? Or this particular initiative. And that can vary too. Do we want them to feel inspired? Do we want them to be informed? Do we want them to connect with the player or the team? Or do we want them to tune in, right?
Right.
There's different things, but it's a great question because I think the power of our spots only goes as far as the power of the insights and the tightness of that brief. So it's very, very important we get that right.
And, it's not the way I look at it. So we bring, as I mentioned, brands into the metaverse, and we get a lot of questions like this. And the relevance here that I'll tie in is that it's about what are the outcomes that you desire, right? If you start from like, what are those outcomes that I want to do, and then build that program towards that, whether it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, no matter what it is, I think from a brand perspective at that brief, if you're going to start from there, that'll really help drive that authenticity because you understand what that outcome is that you're looking for. I think we've got time for one last question. And how does incorporating culture mean to you in your role within the NFL?
How does incorporating culture mean? Sorry, can you say that again? I want to make sure I get it right.
Okay. How does culture, I guess, mean to you in your role? Like, how are you incorporating culture into? So much.
I mean, we incorporate culture into everything we do, right? And culture, by the way, is a lot more than ethnicity, right? Or
Absolutely.
I mean, so living the day-to-day culture is critical. This is why, by the way, we have an army of influencers out there that are in it. Because I couldn't tell you, I do my thing and what I do, but I couldn't tell you, everything that our fans do, because I'm not sometimes the typical, either I may be the typical fan, but I may not be the new young, right. All what do you call it, digital native fan or sure. Whatever. But having those influencers is key. I mean, and making sure, like I said, I mean, incorporating local culture, whether it's at a Super Bowl level, incorporating Inglewood, working with artists, fashion designers, musicians. I mean, all of that incorporates pop culture. Everyone is an influencer these days, right? So I think it's important. Yeah, it's important to have our eyes and our ears and all of us like really hooked into that community and making sure that that community itself influences our brand, right? They shape it. So I think just making sure there's a dialogue there is really important.
So in essence, you're sort of using that influencer pipeline, if you will, to kind of impact and kind of keep your finger on the pulse from a cultural standpoint, how things are changing and how the fans are responding based off of that. That's yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a great, that's a great way to help drive those insights and understand a little bit more so about how you're reaching those audiences and those communities, which is really relevant. I don't know if we're going to get the boot here in a second, but if not, I can't tell. But I do have one more question.
Okay.
Where do you think companies, and I'm going to change this a little bit than the question that I asked, but not in a positive way. Where do you think companies are getting diversity, equity, and inclusion right in 2022?
Where do I think they're getting it right?
Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, there's a lot of really amazing examples, right? Whether it's, I mean, you see the proliferation of D&I leads, right? Yeah. And the focus that D&I has in many organizations. We, by the way, also just brought in, not like a year ago, our own head of D&I. Right. So I think that's really important. I think you see it in who companies collaborate with. I think there's more openness to collaborate with a broader group of, partners, whether it be advertising agencies or again, insights providers. I think making sure, there's representation everywhere, not just in front of the camera or in the things people see, but behind the scenes. I see a lot of progress in hiring. We have a lot more to go, but sure. I see a lot of progress in hiring, in retention, in development. I would love to see, more women on boards, more minority representation on boards of directors and companies. I'd love to see, more diverse representation in our advertising, in products that we create. Right. I mean, there's so much we can still do, but I'm very optimistic that we're headed in the right way. We're at least talking and raising the right issues, which means we're pushing, right? Yeah. And the more we push, the more I think we'll get there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I think it gets back to inclusion, which you mentioned. It's having that voice and having that seat at the table, but to actually be able to impact what you're doing, because it's actually, being incorporated into programs and other hires that are, existing within the organization. And it certainly sounds like you're doing a great job, leading the NFL in 2022 with a lot of your diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. So I'm excited to see that.
Awesome. I'm excited too.
Any predictions for Arizona in 20
Oh, goodness.
Football next year? I know it's so early.
No.
I know my Bears aren't going to be there. I know
no predictions, but a plug on, hey, draft is coming up in a few weeks, and then we're releasing the schedule right after that. So that may give you a good sense.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate the time today, Marissa, and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Marty.
Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Brand Innovators.
Of course.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today. Next up on our stage, we'll be joined by Juan Alonso Torres Benavides, Marketing Director at Anheuser-Busch InBev, and moderated by Vanessa McCullers at Branded Entertainment Network.
So, hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Juan. So good to see you again.
Hi, Vanessa. So good to see you too. I'm going to change
the. See me.
Yeah. I have my brand innovators background, so I will try to. No, I think it's okay like this.
say like that too. Actually, I think your brand innovators background matches, or your current background matches what we see in brand innovators. Okay, so really great to have you on board. Brand innovators, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my voice yet again on behalf of the Branded Entertainment Network, Ben Group. I'm so excited to be here talking with Juan because we've got some stuff to uncover coming out of a great Black History Month and tail end of Women's History Month. I'm so excited to talk with a colleague. I consider you a colleague because we both are in this, quest for providing more culture in our workspace, in our environment, and how we share that with others through marketing. So, that kind of leads me to my first question, because I do believe that people often ask, how does one even get a start in an industry like this? Yes, I understand that you work marketing for a beverage company, but how does one actually, get started in the beverage marketing industry?
To be honest, Vanessa, like I started my career in massive consumption. I've always been working in these big, massive companies. I started in Procter & Gamble in marketing when I ended up the university. Then I went to Nestle. After Nestle, I started in Telefónica, a telecommunications company here, very strong in Latin America. And after that, I wanted to get back to this type of companies in which you are able to touch lives of the consumers, every day. I realized that, the impact that these types of companies can make in culture and into bringing, a better quality of life to the people is strong. So I had the opportunity to start working for SAP Miller at that time. And maybe 4 years ago, when the merge between Anheuser-Busch and SAP Miller happened, I managed to stay in the company with a new culture, new people, a new purpose that was very related with like improving the quality of life of people. So for me, that was the path, and it's been amazing. This, I think, 12 years of career.
I love that you said that, because it's almost like we unconsciously seek out those companies. Those of us who are who can consider ourselves empaths or are more concerned with our communities overall tend to kind of seek out the companies that do address this. So I'm going to ask you a question that we didn't really talk about, but I think you're well prepared to answer this just based on your background. Tell me some of the companies that you see are actually doing this right, that are actually tapping into the community to make a change, a positive change. What are some of the companies that you see now that are doing this right?
First of all, for sure, Anheuser-Busch. I love the company that I work in. Seeing the processes and the intention that we have from inside is huge, because as we talk in another meeting, this is a lot of work. It's not like you wake up one day and you say, like, I want to be an inclusive and diverse company. No, you have to have a plan, and there's a path to walk. So for me, Anheuser-Busch has the processes and the intention and the people to make this happen, step by step. I've seen very important campaigns, platforms, and actions from PepsiCo, for example, with specific communities. Also, when I see the things that Procter & Gamble does in the States specifically, I'm amazed every year. You can see that consistency is a part of all of these companies that are doing something good and something actionable for this I don't want to say problematic, but in this territory of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, Procter & Gamble has always been one of my favorite brands to work with for that very specific reason. Early in my career, or earlier in my career, I've had the opportunity of working some really great programs with them that actually opened me up to understanding that there is the possibility of being able to attach your passion with your purpose. So it's a brand that I've really embraced over the years. Now, you mentioned Anheuser-Busch, where you currently work. The Anheuser-Busch, to me, has been an early, how would you say, change agent. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, back in the mid 90s, 1995, I believe to be specific, they actually ran one of their first LGBT print ads that talked about, I think the messaging was labels belong on beer, not on people. So a message like that to come out in 1995 is so prolific and speaks in volumes about how a brand wants to address diversity. Share with me how throughout the years, Anheuser-Busch has really worked to address diversity internally. Share some of your knowledge, please.
For sure, I think that specific case was bold. That let you see that specific brands in specific countries, have very strong point of view regarding this type of topic. I think that's important from a company that has so many brands in so many countries. The journey for Anheuser-Busch, for me, it's been, from an outside perspective, very targeted in specific communities with brands that can talk to those communities. Every brand cannot talk to every community. That wouldn't be consistent, and we wouldn't be able to have a behavioral change in the lives of our consumers. However, from a more internal perspective, Anheuser-Busch not only has these platforms that helps consumers, but also has these specific programs, within the whole company that helps to change or keep traveling this journey of diversity and inclusion. For example, we now in the company, we have this employee resource group in which people from the company starts to get together to start working for these topics. Myself, I lead the LGBTQ plus ERG in the Middle America zone. So as it is a huge company, we try to separate by zones, by specific communities, by people that want to work with it, and we start doing the job that I think is the hardest part.
Yeah, I think it's critically important to address the diversity internally before you can even actually start to touch diversity externally, because it's not only diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's really about culture and how understanding different cultures can help to shape the imagination and can help to really bring out the most creativity, particularly in the areas that you and I work with in marketing and strategy, when you're able to tap into different voices, right? And really hear opinions that are new and that are different. It really helps to move some of the conversations along and ensure that you are actually speaking to the masses, whether that be a specific demographic target or mass appeal in general, the general market. I think, by listening to all of those diverse voices, that's where you get the ability to kind of move conversations and topics forward. And I think that, go ahead.
Sorry, Vanessa, and just to build on top of that, I think that the change happened in this type of companies when you realize that diversity, equity, and inclusion, are very related with business results. When you are in a meeting and you see different point of views and how that started just like an opinion that anybody else in the table saw, and ended up like on a very actionable big platform or campaign or new business plan, you just realize it that this is important. Like this brings results in a very positive way.
Yeah. I mean, you know, when you really think about it, the whole point is that, you know, we may be representative of brands, you know, whatever job function that we have, but we're also representative of consumers, right? And so we tend to really connect some of our marketing prowess to our own consumer behavior. So speaking on that, I know this is important to me, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you know, brands that have a voice, brands that speak out. Do you think that it's really important to the consumer for them to connect to a brand who has an opinion about something?
Yes, for sure. I think we already passed this era in which, you know, just talking about the functional benefits of the product, you know, were important. I think we have a lot of products right now that, you know, in some way they offer, you know, the same benefit, you know, like functionally it had to be, you know, like a new amazing technology to bring us a very different functional benefit. However, I think consumers, and no, I don't think, I'm sure consumers that, you know, they are expecting from the brands to start a change in their environment. You know, the consumers give us their money. We, for sure, we give them, you know, our product and our functional benefit. However, we have the responsibility to start shaping in a more positive way their lives. And consumers are smart, they're intelligent, they know what are we up to. You know, they know if we start doing this, for example, inclusive or diverse campaign, they know if we are being true about that, if we are being, you know, actually intentional about that, if we want to see a change about that, of if it's just, you know, talking. And consumers respond directly. And you can see that for sure in our on the tests that we do, you know, but also on sales.
Yeah, I mean, we see it on the in terms of what we do at the Ben Group in on both sides, not necessarily just on the consumer side, but also on the content creator side. We do see that brands that connect to certain content creators very early on, right? When they're just beginning their or at the early part of their content creation journey, the brands that support those content creators actually seem to build loyalists, right? These content creators have a sense of loyalty to these brands, which helps the brand also tell their story in a very significant way, because it's coming not just from the placement of the product itself, but also from the context, from the messaging that is shared. Something I actually want to see more of. I actually want to see more brands share stories about what they're doing, not just as a product, but what they're doing as a brand to connect to communities. So with that in mind, you know, I would love to hear a little bit more about what Anheuser-Busch is doing externally in various communities to address diversity, equity, and inclusion.
For sure, and I totally agree with you, Vanessa. It's not only the things that we do, you know, with our consumers, but also with, you know, our stakeholders. For example, and related with your question, we have specifically in this zone, in Middle America zone, we have some programs that work with farmers. You know, that for sure they have their farms, but they are not sure sometimes if they have to make this seeding, you know, small or big, because they are not going to be sure if people is going to buy their crops. However, we managed to have these programs in which we assure them that we're going to buy their crops for making our beers, and those beers are going to be sold in these specific regions, the regions that the farmers are in. So, you know, like that's like a virtuous circle that is not directly related with, for example, diversity, but, you know, is how we can bring these positive topics, this type of you know, sustainable businesses to other stakeholders that helps that communities.
Mm-hmm. No, you mentioned a really good point about sustainable business, because I do believe as we're talking about DE&I, there are multiple facets. I talk often about intersectionality, right? Because it's not just about color, it's not just about gender, it's not just about LGBTQ. There's also like some, there's also some, sorry, I'm seeing that there's a question, great. There's also some, focus around socioeconomic backgrounds and how that affects people. And you can't look at socioeconomic backgrounds without thinking about sustainability and how each community actually participates in how we make the world more sustainable. So that is really, I think that's really key to this discussion, that sustainability is kind of, included in the conversation as we're talking about DE&I. So I love what Anheuser-Busch is doing. Absolutely aligned. Love the mission there, and really working with these communities. I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about how you actually tapped into, being able to connect your passion and your purpose and your work. Did you have anyone in your career that was like a mentor to you that kind of helped to feed that passion that you have?
Yes, Vanessa. I have like two people that I look up to. I had this boss like a couple of years ago. He's Peruvian as me. He works in the company. He still works in the company in New York, and he taught me how this thing that we were talking about just a few minutes ago. In terms of how purpose, not only the diversity and inclusion, but purpose can bring business results and also can connect you with the things that you love. So yeah, for sure, we have priorities and we have KPIs and objectives to accomplish. However, you can put some of yourself on those so you can still be working, but also, fulfill yourself as a worker for the company emotionally. I think that's important, and not, leaving aside the brand strategy or the business strategy. He taught me that. And the other person is from the NAVEP community. Myself in ABI work for the non-alcoholic beverages. We're a beer company, but we have some different types of businesses. She works also in the NAVEP community, Anna. She is my boss. She also works for Global Headquarters. She's a woman so open and so intentional and so passionate about, the positiveness that diversity and inclusion brings to the company, and so worried about for the people to feel comfortable in the workplace. That is really inspiring for you to do the same for other people that works with you. So I think, those are my mentors right now, from one more from a business perspective and the other one from an emotional perspective, but I think are equally important in this type of businesses.
I love that. And I love the fact that you shared that you're Peruvian, and that is a part of your culture. For me, I'm West Indian, I'm Jamaican. That is a part of my culture. That is something that plays a part in the things that I do, in addressing some of the challenges that we see in various Caribbean communities, and definitely in the Black community. So speaking of communities, what role does local community culture play in your marketing and your brand strategy?
A strong role, the strongest role, right now I'm working in Colombia, and as we as Latin people have, similarities, within the countries. However, we're very different at the same time. And right now we are working with a beautiful brand. It's called Pony Malta. And the target of Pony Malta is kids and teenagers. So it's very specific. It's very different. It's very different also for the company. We're a beer company. We, 90% of our business targets adults. However, being inside that culture even if you are not part of that community or that niche or that consumer target, it's so important because again, consumers can tell when you are being true to the brand, true to the campaign you're doing, the platform that you are trying to build. So I think it's so important for you to be inside the culture of your target. For me, for example, it's like how are kids and teenagers now, you know, like it's a different world. They think totally different that we did when we were teenagers. And it's a challenge. It's a side job, you know, for her. You have to do your business plan, your marketing plan, your brand plan. Everything's good. But you also have to spend a lot of time understanding, learning. It's an infinite journey of learning. And sometimes we try to go to the investigation agency and to the other partner. But I think the best part is to go outside, talk to the people, because your experience is as important. You know, your experience as marketeer is
Right.
as important as the experience that, you know, the investigation agency is having.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. I know you mentioned that you're in the non-alcoholic beverage side of the business, and we just talked a little bit about the youth. And I am so inspired by the youth of today. I really feel as though they're so tapped in. They get it. Before we, I'm not going to say that we are older, but we're a little bit more mature, right? It takes us a little. We process things a little bit differently than these young folks do. What kind of trends are you seeing, and how, like, what kind of mechanisms are you using to tap into that youthful consumer? How are you talking to them?
I think in this era, Vanessa, you know, it's so important to have, you know, a direct channel of communication with your consumers. Right now, we are very, you know, like one of our priorities is how we not only have the data of our consumers, but also how we connect with them and we activate that data, you know, in a very true way, you know, how we can be friends for them, how can we partners for them. So for me right now, for sure, we have partners that are helping us to understand how they change every day, because they change every day. But also we have this specific platform in which we have prices for them if they keep in touch with us. And also we try to motivate them to achieve better grades in school. So it's, again, a purposeful platform that allows them to have you know, these prices that they love, but also for us to have the information that they can give us, you know, like in a true way.
Yeah. This generation that's coming up now, they are absolutely truth seekers, and they can spot BS a mile away, which is the reason why it's so important for brands to be as authentic as possible when they're speaking to them. It's like you've got to understand their voice and speak to them in their voice for them to actually, you know, wrap their arms around you, which, you know, it's funny because I feel like when you look at marketing, again, it goes back to looking at DE&I from a holistic perspective. Not only is it all of those segments that I mentioned to you, including socioeconomic, but there's also generational segments that there are, you know, that you've got to consider when you're marketing to different people. Speaking of that, we just got a question that popped up that speaks to this. How does Anheuser-Busch approach product safety and product experience in marketing to young people and adults in today's marketplace?
In terms of the specific beer category, because, you know, like from the brands that we as a team manage right now, we are non-alcoholic, so we are able for sure to target teens and kids. Sometimes, you know, some of the gates that we have is for the parents to have the authorization, for the kids to have the authorization of the parents, so we can connect with them. But, you know, we are very, how can I say this? We're very, you know, strict with the type of communication that we do. What is easier right now, as most of the investment is going year by year to digital platforms, that enables us to be more specific with the targeting that we do. So for sure, we cannot target a youngster with a beer ad, and we can manage that from digital. Yeah, I think that's, I don't know if I made myself clear. Yeah.
No, I totally got that. One of the other things that I've come across recently that really impressed me about Anheuser-Busch is how they have connected with women in the marketplace. Something I found really interesting. I read that nearly half of the U.S. breweries and a quarter of the breweries in Argentina, China, and Europe are led by female brewmasters, which I think I was sharing with you yesterday. I found that so intriguing, not because of my own personal passions of wanting to learn how to make kombucha, but because I just think that's such like an area that you never, and it's, we have to be a little bit more open. Anyone can play in any space. A woman can do anything that she wants to do. So why not be a head brewmaster? I love the way how AB has really wrapped their arms around that and embraced that. Can you share with me a little bit more about how they really focused on the role of women in leadership at Anheuser-Busch?
For sure, I think that's an excellent example, Vanessa. It's an example of walking the talk. So we always talk about we have to have more women in the mancom in higher positions. We know as a society globally that we have a very long path to walk in that direction. But this type of news or this type of actions that we do internally inspired us to keep walking that talk. Internally, we have a lot of programs, not only with brands, but also, with the people that are inside the company, in which we try to start fighting with those crystal ceilings. We try to understand what are the situation of women inside the company, how we can try to balance, these other things that women have in terms of difficulties or barriers that society puts, so that inside the company they have other tools to try to manage that. So it's very interesting, and it's very inspirational to be inside the company and see all that effort, in terms of resources, people, capabilities put on those topics to see a change that is for sure real.
Yeah, that it's definitely something that matters. And I think as we continue to grow in our careers, that is something that we really look to. How are the companies that we're working with addressing DE&I? Is it just something that, they get on their soapbox and talk about, but there's no action behind it? Or is it something that is a part of their DNA, something that they're really focused on? Another call out for me in terms of the AB family and how, they've really addressed DE&I. I noted that they've started this path, this walk, this journey. Back in 2005 was when they instituted their first ethnic marketing group at AB, which to me, I think that was a time when people were just beginning to understand the value of what I call the majority dollar, not the minority dollar, right? And so obviously, as you are marketing to these different the majority diversity segments, right? You've got to have different understandings and different people who speak different languages. And I mean that both in a real literal sense and the metaphorical sense, right? So they've really been leaders in this space. And it's made a difference to you. It's made a difference to me in terms of working for other brands that are the same. How do you use your work that you do at AB to really answer your core passions?
No, Vanessa, for me, very special, very important to work in ABI because as a brand director, I have the opportunity to address the things for this specific target that for me may be a problem before when I was a teenager. This is a specific example, but right now, bullying for teenagers, it's been, a very big problem. As a brand, have the opportunity with our resources to try to address that problem, in a real way. So the brands are very flexible, and the brands have the power to start making behavioral changes. So yes, I think that that's very interesting.
Yeah. I'm glad, I'm happy for you that you were able to find your sweet spot, as I have been able to find mine at Ben. And I think that there are a lot of young people, as I've mentioned, that are looking for that. So not only are they looking for brands to talk to them in their language, young people that, or people who are just starting their careers in entertainment, in advertising, and brand work, they're also looking for brands who answer, their core passions and tap into their core passions. For me, my road was long. I had to go through, what do they say? You got to kiss a lot of frogs before you meet your prince. I've been lucky because I've been around, what's the best way to say this? Like some of the best brands. I've worked for some of the best brands in my career. And right now for what I consider one of the best, because of how they answer the call for DE&I and how they answer the call for us to really tap into our core passions. So I know what kind of advice I would give. I want to hear what kind of advice you would give someone who wants to walk in your path. Like, it didn't happen overnight for you. What were some of the pivotal moments, and what kind of advice would you share with someone who wants to have a similar career as yours, where you're able to make a difference and work for an established brand?
I think, Vanessa, is the first advice that I would give is to be authentic, to be actually true to yourself, and to see what do you like and what you don't like, and for sure to try everything. I started my career in this same type of companies as ABI, Display, Then I wanted to try a little bit more telecommunications, technology, and then I came back. So, and when you find a place in which you can be yourself, for me, that's the grace.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really it. Okay. So as we're starting to wrap this up, we are in some challenging times right now. The last few years for many of us has been dealing with the pandemic. We've seen that a lot of people use that time as a time of reflection. And, it's brought about a lot of conversation around empathy and how we connect with each other, and how we can lead using empathy, right? So, and now we're also in even more precarious times, because now it's not just the pandemic we're worried about. There's wars that are happening. There, people's lives are being affected day in, day out. How does Anheuser-Busch not just look at communities, not just look at trends, but how do you think that they address the concerns that people have day in, day out about just life in general?
Yes, for me it's very interesting, and I came back to this point that brands are so flexible in terms of they can be part of your day by day. So for us, it's a work in progress journey, which we can see which brand being true to themselves, because that's the most important part, can help in this specific parts of the day, or specific topics or territories in which the consumers play and live. So when you find that sweet spot in which brand and consumer problem, start to be the same, or you can or to find a way to solve it, you start action.
Okay. Okay, one last question for you. And I don't want it to be the last question because I'm really enjoying our conversation and I hope we can continue this dialogue outside of this forum. I want to know what you're excited about. Like I feel like this year, even though there's so many precarious things happening and we're not sure how the world may look from one day to the next, we still got to think about the future, right? What are you excited about this year? Like, what do you think 2022 is going to bring you personally, as well as the job that you do at AB? What are you looking forward to?
This is very related with the company and the purpose that we, told to our people like a couple of weeks ago. This new purpose for ABI that we're here for a future with more cheers. That relates directly with that I want this year and the years to come. So I'm in the right company right now, because this future with more cheers, can be different depending of the country that you are in. So for me, using the position that I have or working in the things that I'm working right now, I'm trying to see how a future with more cheers could be for my consumer target, for my company here in this country, and for me. That's very exciting just to think about it. So being specific with me, I want to try to keep changing the lives of kids and teenagers in Colombia. Every little step is a step ahead on this very positive, diverse, inclusive world. So yeah.
Every step, every little moment absolutely does count. I know it's only 12:30 in the afternoon where I am here, and probably pretty early for you too. But if I had a beer in my hand right now, I'd say cheers to you, because I think that the job that you're doing is absolutely phenomenal. And, it's something that I would love to, as I mentioned, connect with you outside of this, so we can talk about how we could potentially align and bring this message of, cheers to everyone, both in our work communities, in the communities that our work services, and to the consumers who are often looking for something to give them a reprieve, if you will, from some of the challenges that we face in the world. So cheers to you, Juan. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And I look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Cheers to you also, Vanessa, and thanks to Brand Innovators for this amazing space. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What an important conversation. Thank you both so much for your time today. Next up, we have Zina Kota, Senior Director of Brand Digital and co-founder of Asian American Collective at The North Face, and moderated by Maria McClay at Google. Hi, Zina.
Good morning. Or good afternoon, depending on where you are.
Yeah, it's morning over here, 9:38.
Same. I'm in the West Coast.
Okay, cool. Hi, Maria.
Hi, everyone. And I'm joining you all from the East Coast. So absolutely delighted to be here.
Wonderful.
Hi, good to see you.
Hi.
I'll let you take it away.
Great. Well, thanks so much for that introduction. I am absolutely delighted today to be able to introduce Zina. And I think, both of us had a few chats prior to this conversation, really excited to share and exchange views on DEI and why it's so important. So I think before jumping in, Zina, you have such a fascinating background. Was wondering if you could kind of take us through and take a step back and share a little bit more about your background and your experiences.
For sure. Thanks, Maria. Let's see. I started my career as an artist, as a music artist. Thought to myself, I will never work a day job a day in my life. And here I am. But it's been a blessing the whole way through. Really started my career at record labels. I worked in rock music, worked in hip hop, worked at an agency doing a lot of brand integration work, which actually brought me to my career as I'm here today. Have been on-air talent. Have produced my own podcasts, web shows. Basically, I lived in New York City and I did anything to make money, as most people know. I'll say that at the beginning of my music career, and as I cruise into marketing and PR and all the different areas that I encompass, I recognized very quickly that there weren't a lot of people who looked like me in those areas. And I found it very important as I started to mature in my career to give back to not only just my employees, but communities around me and make myself available for advice, which actually led me to Asian American Collective, which I started in 2020 with 2 other Asian American women. I'm Filipino. My partners are both Korean. We all had, put in a good 10, 15 years into our career and realized we want to create a community for people who look like us to feel it's okay to go into a career that's completely different than maybe your parents want, or your family have traditionally been accustomed to. So I've been doing a lot of mentorship work, advocacy work, and just helping to bring community moments in New York and LA and nationally when we can. We show up at different key events and really have just built from the ground up on that side. I'm at the North Face full time. I head up all of our brand digital, and I feel blessed to be at the helm of a platform that almost every consumer sees in a real and meaningful way. When you're looking at social channels and you're looking at digital channels, you're looking at the closest and most slight but impactful touch points that a consumer, is viewing for any brand's ethos or anything that the brand is trying to convey. So really, that's what we do. We, have spent a lot of time gutting the way that our social presence shows up, really focusing on DEI, also just focusing on making content that's more compelling for Gen Z, dipping a toe into new digital spaces, gaming, and all these other places that are popping up in the Web3 world, and also content creators. And I feel when you're talking about DEI, right, content creators are such a legitimate, authentic, key way to really express what any brand is looking for and really help to bring that to life and do it in a legitimate way that feels very, very authentic. So that's how I ended up where I am today, a lover of all things lifestyle and culture. What about you, Maria?
Yeah.
You have such a crazy past as well.
Yeah, so thank you, Zena. Thank you. So currently I'm the director of Google Cloud Fashion and Beauty. And so what that means, or the way that I explained to my mom, is that essentially we work with some of the largest global brands to help them use our technology to help them reach transformative goals. It could be anything from how do you redesign your supply chains using technology to have completely localized assortments, or how do you super tailor your search to have better results. So that's what I'm doing today. In terms of my background, I as well had a path where I was one potentially of not so many women. So I worked in finance and M&A and banking, worked in consulting, financial again for a while, economic think tank. I worked at Gucci for a number of years. I was one of the youngest general managers of a number of different countries. So I ran Northern Europe and then ended up my way at Google. And I think, similarly to you, Zena, I think what I saw, to your point, content, I think that's super pertinent. I think that all of marketeers, they have a responsibility and they also have the potential to help shape and ensure that there is diversity out there, not only within their own teams, but also what content is fostered and circulated. So I think that's 100% agree with you there. Similar to you, I think for me, one of this reasons I'm delighted to have this conversation with you is because I do think that having diverse teams build much better outcomes for everyone. I think diversity helps lift us all up and find much better solutions. And also as a mom of 3 young kids, 2 little boys and 1 little girl, it's my hope that, again, conversations like these and the important efforts, Zena, that you're doing helps ensure that everyone has the right to dream and to do whatever they want to do and be allies to others. So I think, I think both of us feel that diversity is quite important, diversity and inclusion. I guess on that note, throughout your career, you've had many different experiences that you've shared. Would love to better understand from your perspective, maybe some examples, like why do you believe so strongly that diversity drives better outcomes? And what does that actually mean in practice?
I think it's tried and true, right, in all the work that I've done. And it's interesting because I've been on all different sides of the spectrum, as you had mentioned before, right? I've been one of the only women. I've been one of the only women of color. I've been the only person of color, right, in any instance. And I think one of the things that keeps bubbling up, especially as we've kind of cruised along over the last year and a half of more hyper awareness in what DEI work means for an organization. And a lot of organizations actually putting their money where their mouth is and creating the right infrastructure, financial obligations to at least buoy up the work, because the work doesn't happen without the commitment of money. And I think that that's one thing we see that's tried and true. But I'm extremely passionate about elevating people of color to leadership positions. I think without it, not just think, I have seen without people in leadership prioritizing those DEI goals, there is no way that you're going to get the same outcome. You're going to have a difference in perception internally as well, because if you're hiring more like diverse middle management and coordinator level people, they're going to have an expectation of an organization to help to elevate what is just, table stakes at this point. And if you don't have people kind of running that up along the chain and financially prioritizing it and prioritizing from a bandwidth standpoint and always constantly kind of embedding into conversations about larger campaigns, it becomes a secondary mission. And that's why getting people and diverse sets of people in leadership positions is a critical piece of this. And I just think that it really starts with you, right? A lot of people feel very overwhelmed by this work. And one of those things that kind of bubbled up, I think, over, Black Lives Matter and some of these other pieces starting to come into play, was that people had an expectation of companies to do things for them in order to like make this big change. But myself even had to come to the realization that the power is actually in our hands to make those changes. And with each of those changes that happens, it's a domino and ripple effect. And it helps to actually bring the larger conversation to the fold with those people, with those diverse perspectives in those leadership positions. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I have one follow-up question because I think this is something super interesting. In terms of some of the initiatives, what are the ones that you've seen work the most? As you said, like it needs financial resources, it needs focus, it needs people in leadership positions. What are some examples of things that you think have worked really well that you've seen throughout your career?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think taking, allowing space and bandwidth within positions to follow your part and passion for things that are values-based, right? Even outside of what I'm doing in the North Face, I used to work in the music industry. Now, I'll be real, the music industry does not necessarily have the highest moral compass, but we tried to be very interactive in spaces that made sense for us, and voting rights, making sure that we were kind of getting into the mix of those things, anything that's like nonpartisan, a big cue there. And I think allowing people to feel empowered to have the time to do those things as part of their day job, but also like compensating and offering additional benefits when they are putting that extra work in is critical, because people are working to feel good, right? They want to feel accomplished. They want to feel like they're doing the right thing. And if an organization doesn't give people that time or that respect or space, especially as a manager, you have to allow people to do those things. Then they're going to start, it's going to erode their affinity for the way that the brand or the company is showing up. So I think that that's critical. I also think that it's really important to offer educational resources in order for people to explore any of those points they're passionate about. Like if I want to go to a workshop to understand more about DEI or, spend 3 days on a retreat, you should have some flexibility or understanding within that to either give people the time off, provide some yearly resources to do so. It's part of your professional development. And I think that I've seen the most success when people feel and understand that existentially it makes them a better worker, and it also makes them a better human, right? So those things are intrinsically connected. And in order for it to have the most impact, you need to connect them together.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think a couple of things that you said really resonated, like allowing people to explore it in the way that feels most authentic to them and learn and educate themselves, but also organizations making space, putting action against it and prioritizing it.
Totally.
I think you need both. That's what I've heard you say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think to your point, the question you asked me before, what does this look like in practice, or what does this feel to me? I think having different vantage points, as you mentioned, is incredibly important. I also think seeing people in senior positions that are diverse, that are different than others, are also important as a signal. It's also important, though, for everyone to take part in terms of diversity, to help sponsor, to promote ideas, and also to be inclusive, because you have lots of people at the table and you can recruit lots of candidates who have, whether it's neurodiversity or in terms of gender or racial backgrounds. But if they don't have a seat at the table and they don't feel comfortable and they don't feel like they can make a contribution, then I think that isn't progress as well. So I think that Some of the things you say, I 100% agree, making the time, making the space. It sounds like it's about focus, priorities, and having aligned values, that it's an important value for the company overall, and ensuring that everyone takes accountability for it.
Yeah, I think that the one point that you just mentioned, like having a seat at the table, but being inclusive. I read a Harvard Business Review. I think that we've discussed this in our pre-chat, but that there was an article, basically these two women were talking about this pet to threat theory. And I couldn't agree more. It really hit me. It hit me hard, because I think that when you're a dynamic personality, or you're somebody who can identify changes that need to be made, you come in, like, it's overwhelming, almost like people want that. But I think what we're seeing in practice, and I've, read a lot about people who are like, heads of inclusion, or like these other roles, that there aren't actually the tools in order to make those changes, or don't have the action points within the functional pieces of the business in order to make that happen. And I think that pet to threat theory is super true. Like, you come in and everybody's like, yes, we have this person, we're ready to go. But then when you try to instill those changes, it's uncomfortable. It's really hard. And as humans, it does take additional effort, no matter what spectrum you're on, to look at somebody else's perspective outside of your own. And to your point, it's really just having that ability to kind of like be a true part of the conversation, and having that mutual respect, breaking bread with other people in that way, that helps to make it a better workplace, no matter how diverse the crew is that you have. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, Zena, and I think to your point, I think also, as a leader, what take to help foster inclusion. Simple things, like simple tricks, I would say, that that people have taught me along the way, that I think is really helpful. So ensuring, if there are people who don't feel comfortable speaking up, just asking everyone to jot down their ideas on Post-it notes, and then sharing and making sure everyone goes around so that everyone has a voice. Being an ally to someone. If you do notice that there's someone who might be, let's say, in a position not of privilege, ensuring that they have a voice, ensuring that you interrupt a meeting and say, hey, haven't heard from Maria recently. Maria, do you have anything to say? So I think there are small ways, to your point. It is really complicated. It's difficult. It's a bit uncomfortable to know exactly what you should be doing, because let's be honest, like, you're aiming for perfection. It's you're setting yourself up for failure. It's about effort, and it's about trying to take action to help others feel included. And that is, I think, a bit uncomfortable, and it's a bit of experimentation, but it's super important. I guess, how, as an individual and as an organization, how have you seen people move from, as you mentioned, really important principles and cultures of practice and ideas that diversity and inclusion is important, but how does it actually become part of that culture, from, to your point, from leaders and throughout the organization?
Well, it's checks and balances across the way, right? I also think that, like, a lot of internal work needs to happen. And I'll definitely give it to our company. We've spent the last 2 years, when everything started to kind of come to light, and even prior to, because we have a nonprofit organization called the Explorer Fund that has been doing equity work in the outdoors for quite some time. And we've always been a values driven brand. But I think a lot of companies have kind of been flipped on their head, right? To have to outline publicly and very quickly a lot of these methodologies to help solve problems that have taken years to actually materialize, right? So that's a lot of pressure for people. I think that a big way is first looking at your staff and the people who are making it your staff, right? Looking at where there's gaps, looking at where you might be lacking in some diversity training. Also, like, in general, making sure that there's a pipeline to advanced those marginalized people within your staff. And that varies, right? Like, you go to tech companies, and I'm Asian American. Asian Americans are dominant in some of the tech companies. So it's an interesting kind of like assessment individually of where your organization is at, especially combating, we've had the craziest few years, right? The attrition and, just employee retention and all those pieces, but delivering at the base level, at the employment level, equitable pay, equitable resources, development resources, and using that as at least the anchor and the roots for how your tree of DEI kind of grows out. So keeping that in line, I think, is really important. Really looking at ERGs as a great resource to help build and foster community with other people who are working within staff. I can't say enough, again, how important ERGs are, but they require time. And they require management across the board giving people time to commit to that, or giving people financial compensation, right? I think a lot of companies are really taking this, either a really like proactive approach to paying employees for putting in that time, because it is bandwidth, it's emotional bandwidth in a way that people don't realize. And I think like it's essential for you to feel included in a workplace. And then also from the outside, allowing people to be values driven in the work that they're doing every single day, right? And this is like, again, empowering your budgets, empowering your casting choices, empowering an opinion, to your point. Like, hey, I haven't heard from you. What do you think of this, right? It's going to people that you may not necessarily need feedback from, but you would want a cultural kind of reference from. And the one thing I will say with as a watch out there is I feel a lot has been put on people of color over the last years to be the voice of. And that's also something that people need to be very careful of and tread lightly with, because not everybody wants to do that. And it's exhausting emotionally, right? Not only are you doing the work, but then you're scoping the work, and then you have your own work to finish on top of that. So I think that's a consideration that needs to be put into place. But allowing people the autonomy to invest in that DEI in the way that they feel brings the best impact, I think is extremely important.
So Zena, you said tons of things that are incredibly interesting. One thing I just want to call out a comment that came across, and it echoed some of the things that you said. Not including is excluding. So I think that really resonated immensely. I think secondly, which you've said a number of times, like it takes time, it takes budget, it's priority. It's as important, it sounds like, as any line item. So it has to be actionable and something that's well funded, something that the company agrees with from a higher level. The third thing that you said, which I think was really interesting as well, is, and would love to hear your views on this. It's really exhausting for people who are in this position to continue to be the voices and the advocates. How would you recommend that others that are potentially in more of a privileged group start taking some of that burden off and start putting more of it on themselves? And then I have a couple of questions that have been coming across that I'll move to.
Yeah. I think that's a great question, right? I think that I don't want to speak for the BIPOC community, but it's been really encouraging to see allyship amongst all communities, right? And it goes way far and beyond just being BIPOC. There's a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion goals that lay way outside of just different intersectional communities, right? We have the disabled community, you have the queer community, you have so many different spaces in between. Inclusive sizing is one thing that we think of all the time, right? Because it goes far beyond just like gender. It goes into many different categories. So like inclusion is always thinking through a cohesive lens, right? And thinking about different viewpoints and the way they're kind of tackled. But I would say it's really important to focus on what matters at any given moment, and making sure that you're kind of like, that you're allowing the space and ability for people to feel openly, speak openly in a circle of trust, and also admit when they maybe need some educational help, right? And I think that ally communities can really help for any of these communities that need a little bit of additional support by listening, by bringing whatever power they can and resources they can to help move towards a more inclusive future, and also by really putting in the time to educate. And really thinking a little bit outside the box. I'm a Democrat, and I spent a lot of time checking out right-wing propaganda and pieces because I want to know why people feel the way they do, right? We don't always necessarily have to agree, but when you're a business person and somebody trying to kind of cohesively bring all of these different things together, you have to understand different viewpoints. And it doesn't mean there's any extremes on either side. It's really understanding how we can find the most common ground to bring it together. So that educational and proactivity point just goes such a long way for so many people.
Yeah, and Zena, I think you mentioned a couple of things that people can do quite easily and doesn't have to take a systematic change from a company, though it is important that companies focus, as you mentioned, on leadership positions, ensuring that they commit the right time and resources, but education. For instance, you mentioned reading something that has a different point of view, or even, I know at Google, we have numbers of talks about people from different backgrounds, just being curious, listening their perspective. Couple of things that we've seen or that has been personally helpful that I've seen with some of the people that within my organization, also with myself, is taking the time to sponsor someone who doesn't come from a privileged background, and making every effort to help ensure that not only their voice is heard, but they do progress to leadership positions because they are talented and because they deserve. But being intentional about it, calling out behavior, making sure people at meetings are able to speak, making tangible goals. You mentioned this as well. There's lots of goals and commitments. I think to your point, the more visible companies can be around, yeah, maybe we're not perfect 100%, but we're making progress, or maybe we're falling behind. But that radical transparency, I think, is something that we're seeing much more of. And I think that's good because it makes us just that much more accountable. And so whether it's individual goals or company goals, that measurement and tracking is something, again, like what could you do? Even if it's just yourself, I make a goal or commitment to read one book about X every month. That's progress and that's education. What are your thoughts on that? Are there any other great articles that you've read or things that you would keep in mind?
Yeah. And I would say that the intentionality is a really great call out, right? I think sponsorship, as you mentioned, is a huge one, and people are craving that. I try to do that in my life here and just in general. And I think as you start to elevate and you become a person who's like more influential within an organization, that can be critical to somebody's career. I've only gotten where I am through sponsorship from others as well. So that paying it forward, I think, as a leader is such an incredible way to actually do that. The other thing I was going to actually say before is, as a leader, especially somebody who's probably a little different than most, right? I've tried to spend a lot of my time in the past year showing up as my full self and who I am now. And we're all a work in progress, right? We're all completely lost until we're found, and we're trying to find what that next stage of our life looks like, no matter what stage you're at. And
the messiness is great, Zena. We're all messy, right? Messiness is great.
We all don't know what we're doing at some point in time, right? But I really try to show up a little bit more as my cohesive self. I think at other times in my career, I've hid a bit of who I actually am. And I'm at a wonderful time where I'm refining those pieces in real time and helping to bring them together to be this new metamorphosis of like who I am next. And I think it's really important to show up as who you really are, especially as a person of color, because we do just as amazing work. If not, we have an incredible different foresight into other different spaces that people may not inherently be part of, right? And suppressing those pieces of yourself will not make you happy as an employee and will not bring you fulfillment within your career as well. So I encourage anybody that I meet that's, hey, got like a little bit of a different spin, like show up as your true self, as long as you're being intentional with what you're doing. And as long as it can resonate from a passion standpoint, I think that that's also such an important piece as well, that a lot of people in general suppress. And that will help you kind of connect a bit more with that DEI work, honestly, because it gives a full expression of how consumers are looking at it. And I think that's just important to do. So when you ask me too about some things that I've been reading or just some things that are helpful, I put a bit of thought of this. I want to encourage, and I'll put it in the chat right now, this Harvard Business Review. I can't say enough how interesting this piece is and how much it's made me think about different parts of my career as a woman and also as a woman of color. Definitely feel that it's a great read. And I've been listening to this podcast recently that may seem a little like why in this conversation, but it's called Second Life, and I'm going to send it in the chat here. And it's hosted by Who What Wears Hillary Kerr, and really talks about how people have, kind of like pivoted their careers. And it's absolutely the most random mix of people in the world, from like Dasha Polano, I can't even say her name, who is an Orange is the New Black, used to be a healthcare provider in New York City, and kind of talks about the challenges that people may have or the preconceived notions of their life that people may have coming from different marginalized backgrounds or different backgrounds, and how they've taken that and pivoted into the business world in a completely different way, and either use that to help kind of fulfill some like other more values driven goals that they wanted or artistic goals that they had. So I just think that it helps to understand how people's lives have formed and shaped. And it helps to give you a little perspective of not only yourself, but the people who you're working with, and also your target consumers and people in other spaces as well. What about you?
Yeah. So Zena, I'm sorry, I have questions coming across. I've got to
no worries.
But this is really great. I think question we have from the audience. Do you think an important part of DEI is investing in community micro-influencers versus celebrity ambassadors? How do you think about that balance within your organization?
I don't think it's a either or. I think you need both, right? Like it's very specific to a campaign. I've spent a lot of time investing in creators in a real way and using my budget, pivoting my budget to substantiate the kind of creators that we're using for TikTok, for instance. And I think it's extremely important to connect with those audiences. And that's the beauty that TikTok has given us, right? That you can connect with real people who are also making their money off of creating videos for the world. And I think it is really important to invest in those people. I mean, it's great to have some high level talent that you align with on some brand campaigns, but I think utilizing and paying your creators what they deserve across the board in different, in different subsets is extremely useful as a tool. And also helps to meet some of those goals because you're really allowing them to be the mouthpiece through their lens and their lived experiences for whatever it is that you're trying to put together for your brand.
Yeah, and Zena, we've seen the same thing also within some of our video platforms. The more authentic you are, particularly today, given the pandemic, the more real people are speaking to people about real problems. It just resonates more, and so that's the beauty of having these platforms for us: YouTube, TikTok, and others. Other quick comment because we're coming close to time, but I'm going to leave with one last question. But a great comment from Lucy. Being resilient is important. Yes, Zena, you've shown resilience, it sounds like, in spades. I think another point that you asked me, what else kind of learning? There's these great pieces. I think vulnerability. I think there's, the imposter syndrome. Yeah, I've read that. There's another article, I'll try to see if I can find it, about what it means as a leader to be vulnerable, to share yourself, to share your experience, to not have perfection, to experiment. I think that's one other thing that has a lot of resonance with this issue of DEI and making sure that the organization embraces it. I think as leaders, we have a huge responsibility. And one easy thing to do is just ensure that when you're recruiting for the pipeline, that you make sure it's diverse and evaluate those candidates and insist on it. Insist on it from HR. Like, I will not finish filling this position, even if it takes me 2 more months, until I have a diverse, however you define diverse, because I think there was a question about that as well, diverse candidate pool, and insist on that and put down your foot.
That's so key. What you're saying right there, like we can all just have a position and wait for HR to send us some candidates, but that's not actually how you get the best talent. And being intentional in the way that you're recruiting, because I do see from Ty kind of like some questions about that. You have to be intentional and you have to think about the groups that might have the candidates that you want, right? Like, does your organization have an HBCU pipeline, right? Does your organization kind of go out to other networks or job networks that are more granular within specific communities, like the one that I run, Asian American Collective? Tons of people send us job referrals or potential jobs for other people that we use within our closed pipeline, right? So it's really building that muscle to have communications with these kind of groups to get the most diverse slate of talent. And it's work. It's real work. And it's a work that actually will pay off long-term if you're patient and do it.
Yeah. And I think to your point, Zena, probably take more time and might take more time, but then you find better candidates, you have more diverse opinions, and then you have at the end of the day, better teams. So last question for you, Zena. If you had to leave this audience with either one reflection, an insight that you had throughout your career, or one advice, what would it be? If they want to take action on this.
Yeah. I would say lead from the heart and make it really your purpose, because it goes into every tentacle of your life, but also be intentional with your work every single day. If you see something that's obviously not right, say something. Definitely feel that your opinion is valued. And if you're not in an organization where you can evangelize that opinion, then you're probably not in the right place. You want, taking the power to do that work every single day is just so critical in whatever way that you can, to really pushing, DEI forward as a whole. We're all learning together. It takes these little steps, and don't think that you're not doing enough, because honestly, again, every little step counts.
That's great. Thank you so much, Zena, for this conversation. It was an absolute delight to speak with you.
Thank you. And I did put those in the chat, so I don't know if you guys can like grab that. definitely just want to make sure that you guys get those readings and that podcast. Thank you, Maria.
Thanks so much, Zena.
And now we're gonna awkwardly
Now
sit
we're
here.
I'm watching the comments come in. So
I
I
am
guess
watching the comments too, actually.
Well, I guess we'll continue until we are switched off. So let's continue. Thanks so much. So as we're waiting to be switched off, I think there's a comment around making immediate changes. I think environment makes a huge difference, and so I think that organizations that invest in this, or teams, even micro teams within an organization, can have a huge difference to people's experiences. And so I think culture eats rules for lunch, for sure.
Hi, thank you all so much for taking the time to speak. It was a great conversation for the time I was here. So thank you everyone for joining us and tuning in. Big shout out to our speakers, our sponsors, and our audience. That's you. Be sure to check out the Brand Innovators website to learn more about our upcoming events. Have a great